Hello everyone, my name is Ramsri. Welcome to a new video. Can you create text animation effects in pure Python? Text motion effects like the ones that you see here. Translation, rotation, scaling, and opacity. In this video, we'll see how to create the effects that you just saw. This concept is called motion graphics, where these four fundamental effects, that is translation, rotation, scaling, and opacity, are individually or combinedly applied to a text or image or video. Without further delay, let's get started. You can find the collab notebook link in the description of this video. In order to understand more about motion design, you can refer to this link by Runway ML. Let's get started with our coding. So let's do the initial setup. We are using Moviepy. So let's go ahead and install Moviepy and all the relevant libraries. So one thing to note here is that I'm not installing Moviepy from pip. Rather, I'm installing Moviepy from a specific commit, that is the most recent commit from the GitHub repository. Just because some of the functions that we are going to use, some code will not work with what's available on pip. Rather, with what's available on pip version, you won't be able to do some tasks like rotation, or you will encounter failures, etc. So instead, I am directly using the most recent code. So that's why we are using this git installation. Now let's run through the rest of the stuff, which is just installing the rest of the things. So here I'm just importing all the Moviepy things that we would require: text clip, image clip, composite, video clip, etc. Let's first create some text, let's say Ramsri, and just display it. Here you can see that Ramsri took 97 pixels in width and 40 pixels in height. So essentially we give font size 30, color yellow, and font Arial. And why I want you to remember this is that placing text on images or video, anything, is basically understanding that the text itself has some dimensions and it should be positioned within the dimensions of the image or video. Now let's go ahead and see how we can do translation, that is move text from one position to another. So create that animation effect for translation. So before I explain this, let's just run this and see what the output is as well, so that it gets clear what we are doing. So what we are doing here is we have some text Ramsri, and in 2 seconds the text goes from here to center, you can see. So you can see me playing again. So the text translates from here to here, so changes the position from left middle to center. That's all that's happening here. Now let's go ahead and see how we can create the code for this. So rather, I'm actually using the duration 0.5. Of course, you can give this, 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, whatever you want, in how much ever duration you want this text to move from here to here. Since I want this to be fast, I gave 0.5 as the duration. And I'm fixing the width and height of the clip. Here I'm choosing 1920 by 1080. Instead, if you already have a video, instead of creating a background clip that I'm doing, you can render this text on top of the video that you already have. So if your video is of different size, you can just load the video and get the height and width dynamically as well. But here I'm creating a black background. So I'm creating a background clip, a color clip, basically with the color 000 black, and the duration is this duration with duration. If you see, with underscore duration and some of the things that we use are different from what's shown in other Moviepy library codes, simply because of the reason that we are using the latest code from the GitHub repository, not pip installation. So pip installation might have set underscore duration, etc. But we'll use what's currently there on the GitHub code base. Awesome. We created a background clip of duration 0.5 seconds. Now we are creating a text clip with name Ramsri, some font size, and color is yellow. And we are setting the duration of the text clip as well with duration. Now once the text clip is created, we want to store the width and height. Rather, we want to also know the width and height of the text clip. That's what we are extracting here. And why do we need this is basically we want to alter the position of this text clip continuously. That's why we need the width and height of it. Now let's come to this translate function. But before coming to this translate function, let's see what we are doing. We created a text clip initially. Now we are setting the position of the text clip with this translate function. If we just gave a tuple, let's say 100 comma 100, what's going to happen is that this text clip, whatever size and width and length it has, it will be placed at that position within the video. But we want the position not to be fixed but rather continuously moving, because we are translating here. That's why we gave a function instead. So that's what text moving is. Now text moving will be combined with the background clip that we have, and we have the video created with composite video clip. Now that video is written into this file .mp4. Now let's come to the translate function. So ideally, as I mentioned, if you give a fixed tuple here, it's going to be fixed at that position for the 5-second duration. Since you are giving a dynamic function here, the text is going to be continuously altered. But what is this parameter t? One thing to remember is that since we are setting the position with translate function, Moviepy internally passes the time every time the text clip is being rendered. So for each frame, that is, for example, here we are writing a video file with the frame rate of 60 frames per second. So if we have 60 frames per second, and if we are doing it for 0.5 seconds, we just have 30 frames in total. Essentially, that's it. So when each frame is rendered, the exact time duration is being passed to this translate function. So that's why you can use the time value and continuously change the position X and Y. What's going to happen here is that since we have 30 frames and the duration is 0.5 seconds, you can understand that this 0.5 seconds is divided into 30 intervals, and each t is passed continuously as that frame is rendered. And for that t, you need to return the X and Y position so that that frame is set with that X and Y position that is returned as the t is passed. So let's create a start and end position. The start is basically the x-axis starts like this. So 0, 0 is at the top. Then y goes like this and x goes like this. So x increases like this and y increases like this. If you want the text to start here, then x is 0, but y is actually height by 2 minus text clip height by 2. Because if we just give height by 2, the text is going to get placed here. But we want to perfectly center it. So we want to take height by 2 and also place the text head a little bit above. That's why we are again getting text clip width by 2 and subtracting that and starting our placement of text from there. So that's why the start position is this and the end position is this, which is essentially video clip by 2 minus text clip by 2. That's the x. So x is actually video clip by 2 and this text clip by 2, because we will start writing from here. Similarly for y, height by 2 minus text clip height by 2. So we have defined the start and end position of this text. So start x and y, and end x and y. Now we need to continuously get the x and y coordinates as the time t is changing for every frame. So simply what we can do is we have the initial start position of x. So x linearly goes from here to here. So x start position plus t by duration. So when t is 0, we just have start position, and when t is zero point 0.5, what's going to happen is this will become 1. So we are going to end up at end position 0. So x will go from here to here, and similarly for y we have the same thing here. So what happens is that this duration is fixed 0 0.5 and this continuously changes in the intervals of this frame rate. So we continuously get a new x and y position, but here we are not changing the y position because we are just getting the text from here to here. That's why you can see that the text comes from here to here. Now let's take a step ahead and see how we can make the text move from, you know, top center to middle, bottom center to middle, right center to middle, etc. So I am running the same code here. You can choose how you want to depending on the comment. For example, this is left center to middle that we have seen. Now let's move the text from top center to middle. So you define your start position again accordingly, width by 2 minus text clip width by 2, that is x is at the center and y is 0. Now x is at center middle and y is also at center middle here. And I just change the function a little bit so that we can pass in the start position and end position accordingly. But rest of the things are the same. I just have a partial from function tool so that this function can be altered, where you have the translate function to which you can pass the start position and end position. And why are we doing this is, when the frame rate is low or when it is not perfect, what happens is that sometimes the last position is missed out in the animation because the dividing etc is not perfect. So in order to even account for that, we are writing this. Let's run this and see. Now you can see that the text drops from top to center. Amazing. Let's just change one more. You can just uncomment whichever one you want. Let's do right center to middle. So we have right center to middle. So you can control your x and y start positions accordingly. You can even give from 0, 0 to here. You can change both x and y simultaneously and do that as well. Let's try and do that. Now you can see that the text drops from here to center. Awesome. So you can play with the x and y positions accordingly, modify the code according to how you want the text to move. Now a small tip to remember is that your FPS, that is number of frames per second, it should be high, because since we are dealing with text effects for smoother transition etc, try to keep it at 60 fps, because usually we'll have 24 fps or 30 fps for regular video, but when you have motion graphics, try to have higher fps because we want smoother transitions etc. With that, let's move on to the rotation of the text. Let's see how the rotation of the text happens. So this is how the rotation of the text is. Amazing. Let's see the code, how it's done. We are setting the duration as 2 seconds. Again, most of the things are common. Text clip with this particular size. The main thing to remember is align center, and also centering the position in the middle of the video. Now what we are doing here is just like previous, but slightly differently. We are creating text rotating, which is we are using the rotate function from moviepy.effects import rotate. From there we are passing in the text clip that we created here, but we are passing in a lambda with this rotate angle, and again, just like previously, continuously as the frame is created, the timestamp t is passed. That's why we have this. And this expand is equal to true is basically as the text is rotating, make sure that the canvas is also expand, not cut off. That's what this says. Now the thing is, sometimes there is offset applied, so instead of not having that offset, whenever t is 0, return 0 angle. And here what happens is that as we are moving from 0 to 2 seconds, continuously we are changing our angle from 0 to 360, because one full rotation takes 360 degrees, and if we want to do that in 2 seconds, we continuously get the time t, and here we are converting this into degrees. So at the end of the day, this will just return degrees continuously. So depending on your frame rate and the number of frames that you have, for example, here you have 60 frames and 2 seconds, so 120 frames. So what's going to happen is that in 120 frames you need to move 360 degrees. So for every frame you advance by 3 degrees. So that's automatically calculated here. Now once the text clip is created, you're just again appending it to the composite clip with the background clip and displaying it. You can see that it's perfectly there. Now let's move on to scaling text. That is basically you can apply text effects like zoom in or zoom out. Let's first see this in action. So you can see that the text scales from whatever size to 2x the size. Awesome. Let's see how this can be done, and in the next couple of cells we'll also see how we can center this and scale. So here we are using text clip dot resize, and this is the lambda function. So essentially as t changes, what happens? So t is automatically passed, as I mentioned. Whenever a frame is being generated or created, t is automatically passed. So at the end of the day, what matters is that at a particular t, what should your frame be? Should it be changed in position? Should it be rotated by a certain angle, or should it be enlarged? That's the biggest question that we are trying to do, and that's why we have these functions. And here what we are doing is just like we were doing it in the position scenario, where we are changing the position as t advance from initial position to final position. Here we are changing the scale actually. So scale factor is basically this resize scale factor is what we are returning. So the scale goes from 1 to 2 in 30 increments. That's exactly what's happening here. And because of that, we are continuously changing in the 0.5 seconds this scale as it is moving. Awesome. Now how can you move this to the center and do the same thing? Because here if we don't apply any conditions, as I mentioned, this is the 0 point access point, or text is going to automatically get placed here and continuously increase in size. Now placing the text in the center and zooming out looks simple at first, but short thing to remember is that we need to apply two functions simultaneously, that is translating and resizing. Let's first see the output and see how this can be done. So here we have a text in the middle. It zooms out nicely. So it scales 2x as we are playing it. Amazing. Let's see what's happening here. So what's happening here is as each frame passes, there are two things that are happening. One is the text is increasing in size, and two is you need to constantly center the text. So you need to keep changing the position, because if you know that a text clip has, let's say, x and y fixed width, then you know that you can center it by taking x by 2 and y by 2 and placing the center there. But if that x and y, that is the size of the text, is constantly changing, then you need to even dynamically center it, because you need to calculate the x and y dynamically as the scale is changing, and based on that x and y you need to center it. So that's why we need to apply two things in tandem, that is translate and resize. So here again resize is the same. We are starting from scale 1, ending at 2x, and there is a scale factor with time duration. And translate, what's happening is that we are continuously getting what's the current scale, then we are getting the text clip original size. Now we are dynamically calculating x and y at that time position, because since we need to center it, we are calculating it dynamically, where instead of doing width minus text width by 2, the text width is constantly changing because of the current scale, and we are returning that. Now you can apply two things in tandem, which is text clip dot resize with this lambda function, that is for dynamically resizing, then again changing the position of it dynamically, because t is passed at every frame that is rendered. This is being dynamically calculated at every frame, so that's why we have this output that is nice and scaling from the center. Awesome. Now let's come to the final section, which is changing the opacity of text. So far we have seen three things. One is text position, that is translation, then text rotation, then text scaling, that is zoom in and zoom out. Now we have opacity of text, that is the transparency or opacity of the text. So essentially changing fade in and fade out. Let's run this again and see. Here what we are doing is we have 4 seconds clip. For the first 1 second, the text fades in, then it stays for 2 seconds, and then it fades out. You can see that the text fades in, stays, and fades out. How can we do this? So again we have text clip duration, and we know the position, etc. So basically width minus centering x and y, that's what we are doing. And what we are doing here is we have the text clip and we have crossfade in for 1 second and crossfade out for 1 second. Since the text clip duration is 4 seconds, crossfade in applies in the beginning and crossfade out applies at the end. So you have the text fade in and fade out effect. So you can nicely see that happening here. Now the beauty is that since you know how to apply all these four effects, that is translation, rotation, scaling, and opacity to text, you can go ahead and create short text animation videos by changing the exact text and applying different effects. Or sometimes you can apply all these effects combinedly to the text as well. That means a single text can translate as well as scale in size, then rotate as well as scale in size, etc. All these things you can try it out. I hope you found the video useful. Thanks for watching. That's all for this one.